Hello everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Curiosity, it strikes us all. It killed the cat. I always disliked that one. But I guess it's fair to say that this awful saying is saying something. With curiosity comes caution. We are curious creatures, and the human inclination to seek knowledge and understanding, it can lead to great things, positive things. But that spirit of inquiry we all possess can lead to some unintended consequences, becoming a catalyst for danger. A great time could become someone's last time. This shift poses a question. What truly shapes our level of curiosity? Some are willing to risk plunging into the depths of the unknown, the one to say, "I wonder what's behind this door," as they open the door. While others prefer to embrace the uncertainty of unopened doors, rather than risk the consequences of blindly stepping through. Which one are you? Tonight's stories may have you leaning one way or another. I'm curious which it will be. So, let's get started, shall we? Hello again, Nancy here. A few weeks ago, I asked for help with what many people suggested may be a doppelganger. Just a quick reminder, I have a husband, Kevin, and 3 kids. We live with my mother-in-law, Linda, who's ill, and she has a nurse, Judy, who stays with her in the mornings. As of my original letter, almost every member of my family had seen or heard this thing, and it's only gotten worse since. Our 7-year-old saw it in the middle of the night for a second time, and again, it beckoned her to follow it. She cried for Kevin, but it left before he got there. Now she sleeps on an air mattress in our bedroom. A few nights ago, my sons were in the living room when it called to them from the kitchen. My oldest son texted me. I had popped over to the neighbors and stayed longer than expected, but rushed right home. Again, I found nothing. Its tendency to mess with my kids is what scares me the most. The following week, Linda's health took a turn for the worse, and she spent a few nights in the hospital. I was home alone doing laundry, and while putting a load into the dryer, my own voice called to me from the next room. By this time, I'd heard the term doppelganger and done a little bit of research. There's a lot of conflicting information out there, but one thing I read from multiple sources was that seeing your own doppelganger would be the last thing you ever saw. That also made me really nervous. It continued for a few minutes while I cowered in the utility room, too afraid to leave. Then I thought to call Kevin, and the voice stopped as soon as he answered. He stayed on the phone while I got my keys and went to sit with Linda at the hospital. I didn't return until after picking the kids up from school, and like the other times, everything was normal for a few days. But that Friday, December 1st, the same day we brought Linda home, my oldest, let's just call him Jack, asked if a friend could stay the night. We'd had guests a few times since all of this madness began, and the doppelganger doesn't seem to enjoy performing for others, so I thought it was a good idea. What he failed to mention, however, was that his friend Chris is a horror junkie. He lives for that kind of stuff. At dinner, Chris asked a bunch of questions about the doppelganger, including what we've done to try to get rid of it. But I didn't think anything of it. Of course, the kids have been talking about it, and of course their friends would be curious. It was only natural. Plus, he sounded genuinely curious. He wasn't at all disrespectful, so I did my best to answer his questions. Had I known about his obsession, I would have been a bit more guarded, but it never occurred to me that he was asking because he thought he could help. Well, that little shit brought a Ouija board into our home, and Jack thought that it would be a great surprise to get rid of our unwanted guest. I've received tons of advice since all of this started, and it's hard knowing what to trust, but one of the few things that were universally agreed upon was don't use a Ouija board. Alas, I didn't learn any of these details until the following morning, but I'll go ahead and tell you about the attempted seance. It took a moment before anything seemed to respond, but once it did, Chris asked if they were speaking to the thing pretending to be Jack's mom, and the planchette slid to yes. Next, Chris asked why, and it spelled L-I-F-E, life. They said it wasn't welcome here and demanded that it leave at once, but nothing happened. They asked if it used to be human and got another yes, but when they asked for its name, there was no response. Again, they said it wasn't welcome and demanded that it leave, and again, there was no response. But they both felt the room suddenly grow colder. Next, they asked if it had died of natural causes, and it responded, no. So they asked if it was murdered. That time, it said yes, and a bottle of water fell from Jack's desk onto the floor. At this point, the boys decided that they'd had enough and put the Ouija board away. Things got so much worse afterwards. Chris went home early the next morning, too afraid to stick around after I learned what happened. Jack didn't want to tell me, but he's an awful liar. When he feels guilty, it's written all over his face. I've never been so angry with him. I had to take a few minutes to collect myself before we could even be in the same room. It was really important to keep my cool, and not just because this doppelganger thing seemed to feed on negative energy. Jack meant well. He wasn't trying to make things worse, and above all, he's just a kid. Kids make mistakes. That's how they learn. It's part of our job to help them through this process, and I can't do that if he's afraid of telling me the truth. Kevin and Linda had an equally difficult time, but we got through his whole story without anyone losing their temper. I did some more Googling and asked Jack if they said goodbye before ending the session. They had not. Again, the research was wildly inconsistent, but some sites suggested it was better late than never, so I made Chris bring the board back and stood over the boys while they finished it properly. Then I gave the kid $50 for it and burned it in the backyard. That's how desperate I've become. The next few days were hell. The doppelganger was heard calling from another room 3 times in 3 days, one of which I heard myself, and Linda saw it pass by an open door Monday morning. We never had so many happen so close together, but that wasn't the worst of it. I don't know if the following incidents were the doppelganger or if there's a new entity in our home. Saturday night, we tried to wind down with a few Christmas movies. Our TV hangs over the fireplace, and the mantel is lined with decorations and a few photos. Out of nowhere, a heavy crystal reindeer fell onto its side. We all saw it, but none of us say anything. The following night, we all woke up to the sound of violent banging on our bedroom door. It was 3:20, and we knew it wasn't the kids. Our youngest is still sleeping on the air mattress in our room, but she leapt onto our bed when the knocking started. She and I huddled in terror while Kevin ripped the door open in anger. Unsurprisingly, no one was there, and the house fell silent. It woke my other 2 kids as well, but they were too frightened to get up. None of us got much sleep the rest of that night. Now it's Monday night on December 4th as I write this. It terrifies me to think what else will occur between now and the time you're hearing it. But many of the things we've read say that we're essentially feeding the entity or entities our energy when we give it attention. For that reason, we've decided on a full boycott. We're not going to react when something happens or talk about it or research it. We're going to pretend nothing is happening and live our lives accordingly. It's either this or moving. We really don't want to leave, but if this doesn't work, we will. I'm not sure if there will be another update after this. If our plan fails, there will be no reason not to write, but if it succeeds, I don't want to mess with it. So, no news will mean good news. I want to go ahead and say thank you all for listening. Those of you who commented, whether it was advice or just words of support, you've made this burden a little bit easier to bear. I wish I could hug each and every one of you. Well, happy holidays, and hopefully you don't hear from me again. I think I purchased a cursed amulet from a homeless lady. We have a large outlet mall where I live, but the main store in the center, it used to be an Old Navy, has been empty for the last 3 years. Sometimes they use it as a weekend flea market and anyone can sign up for a booth. My wife, Pat, and I have found some great antiques there, so we make it a point to go whenever it's open. This year they did something a little different and opened it for the entire week after Thanksgiving. It was the biggest we've seen yet. The whole building was packed tight with vendors, leaving only a few thin aisles to navigate the stores. As usual, Pat and I split up at the entrance with a plan to meet back at the car. At the end of the first aisle, tucked off into the corner, stood an elderly woman with a wooden tray hanging from her neck. It was like what you'd see the peanut vendors wearing at a baseball game, only this one held a bunch of old jewelry and small trinkets. She had long, stringy white hair, and many of her front teeth were missing. Her black dress was dirty and frayed at the edges, and she had no stockings to keep her legs warm. It was 35 degrees outside and not much warmer inside, but her sandals left most of her bare feet exposed. Her merchandise wasn't particularly appealing, but I wanted to give her some money without insulting her. When I asked about a yellow pendant on a gold chain, she said the amulet was blessed by a priestess and granted the wearer good fortune. I didn't believe her, but I wasn't buying it for the value, so I gave her a 20 and put the necklace in my pocket and wished her a Merry Christmas. The owner of the neighboring record booth had returned, and I spent a few minutes browsing through their collection. Afterwards, I turned back to the old woman for a final farewell, but she was gone. She had only stood a couple of feet away. I didn't think I was so engrossed with the albums that I would have missed her leaving, but apparently I had. Later at home, I showed my wife the necklace and asked her if she had seen the woman. She hadn't, but she liked the amulet, and I helped her put it on. That night, she woke up a little bit before 4. She was crying, on the verge of hyperventilating, sweating, shaking profusely. I turned on the lights and screamed. Behind her, in the corner, I saw a brief glimpse of a shadow figure before it disappeared. Pat didn't see it. She was staring at me in wide-eyed confusion. Now even more terrified due to my outburst. I wasn't about to tell her the truth while she was already upset. Pretending to be startled by her disheveled appearance may not have been the best cover, but it worked. She instantly began recounting her nightmare in which she'd woke up to find a tall shadow figure standing over her. It began slowly reaching towards her. She finally forced herself upright and managed to wake up. If I hadn't seen the figure for myself moments before, I would have dismissed it as sleep paralysis. But now, I don't know what to make of it. For the time being, we went back to sleep, and the following morning I told her what I saw. She was glad that I waited to share the information, but we didn't understand why this was suddenly happening. Pat's childhood home was haunted by a friendly spirit, so she's had encounters before. But this was the first time I had ever personally experienced anything. We also agreed that nothing about this presence felt friendly. It had felt cold and angry. We've lived in our house for almost 3 years without any strange incidents. So we took a closer look at our flea market purchases. Pat had also picked up an antique hand mirror, and I found a gentleman's pocket watch manufactured in 1895, along with a few other suspicious items, but deep down, we felt the blame laid solely with the amulet. We Googled a few cleansing rituals that we tried on everything, just to be safe, and nothing happened for several days. We thought it had worked, but then I got up to use the restroom in the middle of the night, and I saw the shadow figure standing behind me in the mirror. That same night, Pat had another sleep paralysis incident, during which the shadow figure placed its hand on her chest, and she felt an uncomfortable pressure for what seemed like several minutes. Then her alarm went off and it was suddenly morning. Since it was the final day of the flea market, we decided to go back in search of the old lady who sold me the amulet. But we couldn't find any sign of her. We spoke to the other vendors, customers, and even the event coordinator, who was extremely difficult to track down, but no one had a clue who we were talking about. When we returned home, we both saw the shadow figure on the far wall before the light came on. Pat didn't want to go to sleep with the amulet in the house again, but taking the trash to the curb wasn't far enough. We tried to drive to a grocery store about 5 minutes away, but got a flat tire halfway there. It was on the back passenger side, and I couldn't find a reason for the blowout, but I didn't spend too long questioning it. More than anything, I just wanted to get the donut on and be done with that damn amulet. I pulled over as far as the road allowed, but we were on the shoulder of a busy highway. Even though I was careful to keep my body tucked away from traffic, that almost wasn't enough. Had Pat not been watching and screamed when she did, a little blue Toyota would have plowed straight into me. I dove out of the way, and the car swerved just in time to avoid a full collision. The asshole took out our driver's side mirror and kept going. I wanted to file a police report, but Pat was so upset I couldn't bear asking her to stay out there even longer. Likewise, I couldn't stand the thought of driving another mile with that amulet, so I threw it into the woods on the side of the road. Then, I finished the tire as quickly as I could, while stopping each time traffic became too heavy, and we drove home without any further issues. So far, everything's been normal ever since. We haven't seen any more shadow figures, and Pat hasn't had any more sleep paralysis incidents. Hopefully, it stays that way. Yo, what the fuck was just in my yard? I'm reading a book on the couch in the living room. The TV's off. It's currently 1:36 in the morning, and I'm fucking home alone right now. There's this loud clack at the window next to me, like something hard had just hit the glass. So I set down my book and open up the curtains a little bit. I live on the second floor, and the bushes outside are trimmed probably 3 to 4 feet lower than my window. There's this creepy gnome-looking thing sticking out the top of these bushes, looking up into my window. Its eyes were big and shiny black, very thin white ring before the line of his eyelids. I found my phone by feeling around, but I never stopped looking at this thing. When I found it, I tapped the bottom right-hand corner to open the camera. Then, I quickly lifted my arm and zoomed the screen to get a picture, just as it dug back into the bushes, then out the front. Again, I'm home alone right now. My roommates live downstairs. I'm terrified they didn't lock their sliding glass back door, and I'm too afraid to go check. Our living quarters connect between a set of stairs by the front door. We share the front door to leave. I know that door's locked because I locked it when I came in tonight. This thing, it's nowhere outside. I pressed my head against the window, trying to look as far vertically down as I could. But I couldn't find it. It moved incredibly fast. I'm typing this from my phone right now, still sitting on the couch, now intently listening for any movement downstairs. And holy shit, I think I managed to get this thing in a picture. It's zoomed in and it's grainy as fuck. I can't believe how shitty the resolution looks. My phone isn't the oldest, but half decent light and zoomed in. Here's what you get. Jesus Christ. I circled it in red and outlined it. Like, you can see that, right? It was looking up directly at me. It was not an animal, clearly a little person with a tall hat. It used 2 arms with hands and fingers to climb back into the bush. I don't know what to do. As a child, I was always fascinated by the stories my father would tell about growing up in a small town, Flatwoods, West Virginia. He would recount times of roaming through the dense forest at night or during the day with friends. Sure, they had plenty of parks and soda fountains or other relics that they could have enjoyed for the time, but they preferred the wild, as most young men did back then. One story that's not related to the main story I'm going to share is the time my father encountered a black bear about 60 yards from his backyard, which sat on the outskirts of Sutton Lake. My father had been walking around, messing around the tree line with his dog. He'd been out there for hours, and he knew it was time to start heading back, so he called his dog to come, but he was standing in a ready position, staring into the forest. Annoyed, he called again, and just as he turned to make his way back, a low growl echoed through the trees. He slowly turned around, his heart pounding in his chest, and that's when he saw it. A pair of almost gleaming yellow eyes staring back at him from the shadows. It was a sleek, large, and vocal black bear. Its fur bristled as it sniffed the air, assessed him and his dog with a mixture of curiosity and likely hunger. He knew that running may provoke the bear, and he couldn't leave his dog behind. So, knowing he had to appear as threatening as possible, he slowly raised his arms in the air, trying to make himself look as large as possible, all while never breaking eye contact with the predator. The bear actually rumbled in response, and for a terrifying moment, my father felt that he and his dog might be the next meal for this bear. But then, as quickly as it appeared, the bear turned and vanished back into the darkness of the forest. Scary, for sure, but it doesn't compare to the uneasiness I've gotten from some of his other stories. My favorite, by all means, is my father's retelling of the time he encountered the legendary Flatwoods monster. According to my father, when he was just 8 years old, he and 2 of his friends were part of a group of kids who'd witnessed the bizarre and unexplained series of events back in 1952. My father says it wasn't even fully dark on that Friday night when they'd first spotted it in the sky. The UFO, that is. They'd been playing a makeshift game of baseball in one of the larger fields in the area. They were being supervised by a couple of parents, none of which belonged to my father or his friends. Some of the boys had about decided it was time to run home, when my father's friend Denny grabbed him by the shoulder and told him to look up. The group, which consisted of children and adults, all claimed to have seen a bright object streaking across the sky. Then it appeared to land, not crash, on a nearby hill. There was nothing in place to stop anyone from investigating, so that's what this ragtag group did. As they made their way through the dark opening of the forest, a strange sense of unease settled over them. My father said that it was as if the very air itself was filled with a thick, palpable dread. Even the adults hesitated as they continued into the forest. The children followed closely behind. Suddenly, a piercing, otherworldly screech shattered the silence of the forest, freezing the group in their tracks. They were now at the crash site, and this is where the group encountered an unidentified creature, the one surely responsible for the screeching sound. In the flickering light of just one flashlight, they caught a glimpse of something unimaginable. It was a creature with an almost glowing red bulbous head and a spade-shaped, metallic, greenish-gray body. My father recalled claw-like hands matching the intensity of the creature's head. A massive creature at that, exceeding the flashlight's glow by quite a bit. It had an overall dark and menacing appearance, seeming to tower over them from a distance. But there was also a distinct sulfuric smell that filled the air around them. As they stood in mostly silence, a woman then cried out in shock, causing the children to recoil behind the adults. Then, the creature let out another ear-splitting screech before darting off into the inky blackness that was the forest. leaving the group encapsulated with fear. Eventually, the adults ushered the kids out of the forest and back to their original area. As they made distance between themselves and the forest, the sulfuric smell remained pungent on the group, a smell that would take a hefty wash to remove. For years, my father swore with every fiber of his being that what they had witnessed that night was not of this world, but something far more unfathomable. He swore that it was true. In the years that followed, my father's account, along with several others' account of the encounter, it became stuff of a local legend. Now, far more than ever, it's advertised as a city known for the green monster. However, the story doesn't go without criticism. A lot of people say it's anything but a monster that inhabits the forest. You'll hear anything from the forest being haunted by ghosts to the whole event being nothing more than a meteor and a barn owl. But as I've grown older, I've heard it repeated by others, some who claim they were there, some who are like me, sharing stories from relatives who claim to have experienced something otherworldly. I guess more than anything, I'm inclined to believe it's true because my father wasn't one who needed to tell tall tales. His stories were all pretty interesting on their own, and this story, well, he was afraid of that thing. Curious about it from the moment he saw it till the moment he died. Curious, but cautious. Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I have over the years. Thanks for reading. Let me start with, I always try to keep my mind open, and I always try my hardest to put positive energy out there. But recently, I lost my temper. It was justified, but still not my proudest moment. During my grown woman temper tantrum, I loudly voiced my pure rage at a situation that was, in my opinion, unfair. I saw someone who was less qualified for a position I was going for get the position. This is because, as my boss said, they need a positive impact in their lives right now, and that's why they have this position now. Okay, that's pretty shitty to me, especially when I needed that positive impact as well. I just never spoke up. I also need to mention that my boss is my mother-in-law. She holds me to a much higher standard. I understand it in part, nepotism and all, but it left me completely enraged, like nothing had in a while. As I was voicing this outrage, I turned away from my husband and toward the wall, one with a solar catcher that hasn't been working for a year, but my child gifted it to me so it still hangs. I raised my hands and voice as I screamed, "That's a bunch of bullshit." And so my husband wouldn't feel like I was mad at him, I threw my hands at the object, and all of the red suns suddenly lit up. My husband's mouth dropped open. I screamed, "What?" and threw my hands again, like I was throwing an invisible ball. The entire thing lit up red on every single sun in this once defunct solar catcher. Again, my husband was shocked. He attempted to calm me down. As my anger subsided, I said to him, "See, we carry energy in our bodies." Admittedly, I was being a little smug, but later on it came to me that I may have more luck if I could focus more positive energy and possibly project that outward in the same way. Now, the weird parts come in. I received a message from someone who I didn't know very well at all. She asked me a question that made my mind think, what type of scam is this? She directly asked me when the last time was that I focused on my energy. She then gave me a speech that she'd been feeling my raw energy in a state almost half a continent apart. She said that she thought that I needed to try to harness some of this energy, and she wanted to help. I kindly told her thanks, but no thanks, and I left the conversation. Skip ahead a few hours. I made a coffee run for the morning since my favorite energy drink wasn't what I was craving. As I'm in the checkout process, a lady is staring at me. I have no idea who this person is, but I just assume that I look like someone she knows. I watch out of my peripheral vision out of habit as I'm getting into my car, and she's heading to her car also. Her eyes are fixed on me, so I think, okay, weird, but whatever. I see that now I need to get gas, and I head to the nearest gas station about a half a mile away. As I'm fueling my vehicle, I hear from behind me a very meek, "Excuse me, ma'am?" I turn around and it's the lady. My hair starts to stand up on my neck as I scan the parking lot for a big white van or someone to be lurking just out of sight. I listen to a lot of scary stories, by the way, so I've learned a lot from them. But I don't see or even feel any malicious energy at all. I just kind of stand there, puzzled, and I ask the woman, "Yes, can I help you?" She then backs up a few steps and takes a deep breath and says, "I don't know how to say this and sound like a sane person, but, well, I saw your dream last night. I was one of the bystanders in your dream. You probably won't recognize me, but it's truly tripping me out right now, and I have to know that I'm not crazy." She says with a slight laugh, indicating that she's doubting herself a little at this moment. I take a deep breath and I'm recalling my last dream memory. I think this is so weird, but I felt truly interested, as well as a little out of place for some reason. I think for a moment, this was last night's dream, and I haven't discussed it with anyone at all yet. So I say, "Okay, you think you were there. Tell me about it." Trying to keep my mind open, yet not denying that bit of skepticism. This is where it truly took my breath for a moment. She says, "You put a crown that was your father's in your dream on your daughter's head, and you told her that she held a new responsibility and purpose in life now." Then she looked down, a bit sheepishly, then returned her gaze to see my reaction. Now, it was my turn to stand there with my mouth wide open, hands sweating. It was exactly what I'd dreamt about. To the moment that I awoke, I managed a, "Oh shit," as I covered my own gaping mouth. She smiled and sighed a breath of relief. "Thank goodness I'm not crazy, but this is too weird. In a cool way, though." I'm still standing there, practically vibrating, and the alarm on the car beside me starts to sound off. The owner comes running out and is trying to get it to turn off. This is when the lady that followed me says, "It's okay. Breathe. I'm not here to do anything other than confirm that somehow I shared a dream with a complete stranger. It's okay. I promise. Just breathe." I hadn't noticed that I'd been holding my breath, and upon exhaling it, the alarm on the car became silent immediately. This could be a complete coincidence, the car's alarm, but I'm starting to feel my energy calm and return to my physical body. The woman then said that it was a true pleasure to meet me in person and handed me a quartz crystal from the many on her bracelet. She puts it in my hand and closes her hand around mine. She then says that she has one last thing to say, and I'm all ears. "I feel it's important to tell you that you possess an enormous amount of energy. This can be very good, but it can also have negative effects if you're not willing to be open-minded and ignore the vast amount of energy that you carry. You may want to meditate or organize your channeled energy, harness that and do good with it, not just for others, but for your own self. Take this and use it for a conduit and keep some of your energy with you always. I hope that helps you out, and I hope that you're not offended, but most importantly, I hope that you can realize your potential. I admire your kind. You have actual real-life energy, and it's radiant to many people, even if they don't have an open mind and know what they're drawn to. Take care, Princess, and teach your daughter how to harness her unique gift that you've passed on to her. This dream is more than just a dream." I'm sitting here in my car on the side of the road now, just to manically type this out to share with you, and my hands are absolutely shaking. What are the chances of getting confronted with claims of others feeling your energy, and by more than one individual, within the hour of you waking up? First by message from an acquaintance hundreds of miles away, and then by a complete stranger in the same town that you live in. Could I really possess this gift? Do I truly hold energy that I can do good things with to the magnitude that I'm being told? And how? How the hell did this woman see my dream? And just so you know, as a precaution, I scanned the crystal with my phone for any tracking devices that could have possibly been in this gift. I have an open mind, but I also have a cautious side. I found that the crystal is just that, a crystal. No nefarious tracking chips, etc. And if I truly gifted my daughter the same power, how do I approach this subject with her? She's 17, and she does possess her own radiant energy that I feel every single day, seeing a purple and gold aura encompassing her when I close my eyes and think of her. My apologies for this being all over the place at this moment. I'm truly just in a state of shock or awe, and I immediately knew that I wanted to share my moment with others who possess an open mind. If there's any advice or guidance that anyone could possibly give me, please feel free to comment. I appreciate your listening to this crazy story that just happened and letting me feel safe in sharing it with others. This all just happened this morning, and I'm baffled. And if I do possess that type of power, I can assure you that I will use it for good, and I pray in a way that the positive energy I'm putting out into the world finds you when you need it most. For now, I'm trying to make sense of this newfound ability that I seem to have. It could all be one huge coincidence, but it seems really real to me. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. So, whether it's your first time or you're a regular, thanks so much for joining me. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open long enough to find those deep sleep videos, and of course, double features. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of my patrons, whom I appreciate so very much. Tracy S, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, The Dark Cosmos, Marion T, Rat Girl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Lissane, Arlene F, and Adrienne. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining my Patreon, patreon.com/thedarkesthour, or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.